Charlotte Miller woke to the sensation of her skull being hammered from the inside, each pulse a mallet against an anvil. The sunlight, harsh and unforgiving, filtered through heavy, dark curtains that were definitely not her own thin, worn ones. These were expensive blackout curtains, the kind she'd seen in design magazines and could never afford on her junior analyst's salary. The air smelled of fresh coffee and something else, a woody, expensive men's cologne that was irritatingly familiar. But the most disturbing discovery wasn't the luxurious minimalist penthouse, with its glass walls revealing a panoramic view of the sleeping city, nor was it the fact that she was wearing only a man's Egyptian cotton dress shirt soft against her skin. It was when she turned her face on the feather pillow and found Alexander Sterling sleeping beside her. His dark hair, usually impeccable, was tousled over his forehead, and the serene expression on his face was a complete contrast to the steel mask of the cold, calculating CEO she knew from meetings. "Oh my God," she whispered, the sound lost in the silence of the room. Her mind was a fog, but fragments of the previous night began to surface. The company holiday party, the loud music, the overly generous open bar. She remembered Beatrice, her best friend, insisting she let loose a little. "You work too hard, Charlie." And then, the clearest image, a heated argument with Alexander himself, her voice raised, accusing him of being heartless because of the recent layoffs. After that, everything was a blur of colorful cocktails, laughter that didn't feel like her own, and the sensation of stumbling. Alexander stirred, a low murmur escaping his lips, and Charlotte froze, holding her breath. He opened his eyes slowly, those brown eyes that were usually so intimidating, capable of dissecting a report from 10 paces away, but which now looked confused, vulnerable, and, for a moment, incredibly human. "You're awake," he said, his voice hoarse with sleep, a deep sound that vibrated in her chest. "How are you feeling?" "Like a truck ran over my head and then backed up," Charlotte replied, her voice scratchy. She pulled the shirt down, trying to cover more of her legs, desperately searching for some dignity. "What happened last night?" Alexander sat up in bed, the sheet falling away to reveal a broad chest and strong shoulders. He ran a hand through his hair, a futile attempt to tame it. "You don't remember anything?" "If I remembered, I wouldn't be asking," she retorted, sarcasm coming naturally, an armor against the panic rising in her throat. "I was drunk." "Very," he confirmed, and the corner of his mouth twitched slightly. Something in his tone, an absence of judgment, made Charlotte relax a millimeter. "You argued with me fervently about the company's restructuring, called me a soulless capitalist in front of half the marketing department, and then tripped over your own feet. I couldn't let you drive in that state. So you brought me to your place?" she said, the sentence sounding more like a shocked statement than a question. "I tried to find out your address, but you insisted you lived where the heart is free from corporate oppression. It wasn't very helpful." Despite the embarrassing situation, a fleeting smile threatened Charlotte's lips. That sounded exactly like something she would say. "And then she gestured vaguely between them, the fear returning in full force. "No," Alexander said immediately, his steady gaze meeting hers. To her astonishment, she didn't know if she felt relief or a microscopic pang of disappointment. "You passed out on my couch. I brought you to the guest room. I slept in here because, well, you kept talking in your sleep about what an insensitive monster I was, and I wanted to make sure you didn't wander off in the middle of the night and do something stupid." Charlotte studied him, searching for any sign of a lie, but his face seemed sincere, almost tired. "Why do you care?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. He hesitated for a second. You work for me. It's my responsibility." Since when does Alexander Sterling care about social responsibility? She challenged, the old image of him returning to her mind. "Maybe you don't know me as well as you think," he said softly. There was something different in his voice, a gentleness she had never heard before, that completely disarmed her. At that moment, Charlotte's phone began to ring insistently on the nightstand, the shrill sound breaking the bubble of tension. It was Beatrice. "Charlie, where are you?" "For God's sake! You disappeared last night, and I'm worried." "I'm fine, Bea. Calm down," Charlotte answered, painfully aware of Alexander watching the conversation with amused interest. "Something came up. I'll talk to you later. Are you with someone?" I recognize that tone. It's your don't freak out, but something happened voice. "Oh my God, you finally hooked up with someone. It's about time. Who's the lucky guy? Is it that cute guy from IT?" Charlotte hung up quickly, her cheeks burning bright red. Your friend sounds enthusiastic, Alexander commented, a genuine smile now playing on his lips. She has a very active imagination, Charlotte muttered, looking away and searching for her clothes. Where are my things? In the laundry. You, got sick on your blouse? Perfect, she sighed, closing her eyes. Just perfect. Alexander stood up, completely at ease in his own home, and went to a dark wood wardrobe, returning with a pair of gray sweatpants and a black cotton t-shirt. You can wear these. They're my younger brother's. They should fit. Charlotte accepted the clothes, the soft fabric in her hands, still processing the surreality of the situation. Why are you being so nice to me? He paused for a moment, leaning against the doorframe. Maybe because you're the first person in years who's told me the truth to my face, even if it was while screaming and soaked in gin and tonic. I said some terrible things, didn't I? You did, he confirmed, but the smile in his eyes reassured her. You also said I have nice eyes and that I'd be a decent man if I wasn't an oppressive capitalist. Charlotte groaned, covering her face with her hands. I need to leave. Disappear. How about some coffee first? Strong. You shouldn't be driving yet. It was a simple offer, but there was something in the way he made it, an unexpected kindness, that made Charlotte hesitate. Don't you have a company to run? An empire to command? It's Saturday, he said, and for the first time in a very long time, I don't want to be at the office. Charlotte looked at him, really looked at him. Without the impeccable Armani suit and the rigid CEO posture, Alexander seemed younger, more human, almost approachable. Coffee then, she conceded. But then I'm leaving. Of course, he agreed with a nod. Then you'll leave. But as she followed him to the kitchen, feeling the cool hardwood floor under her feet, Charlotte had the strange and terrifying feeling that nothing would ever be the same again. The night before had stirred something deep inside her, a dangerous curiosity about the man behind the corporate facade, and that scared her more than any hangover. Alexander's penthouse kitchen was a study in clean lines and functionality, all white and gray tones with state-of-the-art brushed steel appliances that probably cost more than her annual salary. She sat on a high stool at the quartz countertop, watching him prepare the coffee with an almost scientific precision, grinding the beans, measuring the water. Are you always this meticulous about everything? She asked, genuinely curious. My grandmother always said that a good cup of coffee is like a good business. It requires attention to detail, patience, and the right raw materials. He answered without looking at her, focused on the coffee maker. Your grandmother sounds like a wise woman. She was. She raised me after my parents died in a car accident. The information hit her like a punch to the gut. I didn't know. I'm so sorry. It's not something I put in the company's annual report, Alexander said, finally turning to face her, his eyes dark. You must be wondering why I'm telling you this. I am, Charlotte admitted, her voice low. Yesterday, you were the cold, calculating CEO. Today, you're making coffee for the employee who called you a soulless capitalist. Maybe I realized you were right, he said, handing her a black ceramic mug that warmed her hands, at least partially. The coffee was perfect, strong but not bitter, with a rich, complex flavor. Are you telling me that one drunken night from a junior analyst caused an existential crisis for the great Alexander Sterling? It wasn't just one drunken night, Alexander said, leaning on the counter in front of her a little too close. You said things I needed to hear, about how my decisions affect real people, with families and bills to pay. About how I've become the exact type of person I used to despise when I was younger. Charlotte studied his face, searching for any sign of manipulation or trickery, but all she saw was a raw, disconcerting honesty. And what do you plan to do with this Saturday morning epiphany? I don't know yet, he admitted. Maybe start small. There's an event this afternoon, an urban arts tour through the city. Normally I wouldn't go. It's the kind of thing my advisor would say adds no value to the brand. But I thought maybe you'd like it. Her heart skipped a beat. Are you asking me on a date? I'm inviting you to show me that I'm not just an oppressive capitalist, he said, and there was a playful tone in his voice she had never heard before. Charlotte laughed, the sound surprising even herself. This is ridiculous. You're my boss. Technically, I'm your boss's boss's boss, he corrected, with a crooked smile. And it's Saturday. There are no rules about Saturdays in the company policy. Oh, right. especially when it comes to billionaire CEOs and junior analysts. Multi-millionaire, he corrected again, his tone now purely teasing. And you're not just a junior analyst? I read your report on the sustainable marketing campaign. It was brilliant. Charlotte felt the air catch in her throat for a second. You read my report? I read every report that comes across my desk, Ms. Miller. Yours stood out. The way he said her last name sent a shiver down her spine. Why? Because you weren't trying to impress me with corporate jargon. You were trying to do what was right for the company and the community. You wrote that profit and purpose don't have to be enemies. That line stuck with me. They were silent for a moment, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the space, the weight of his words hanging in the air. About the arts tour, Alexander said finally, his voice softer. No strings attached, just two people exploring the city. Two people who work at the same company, Charlotte pointed out, her caution returning. Two people who might have more in common than they think. His phone rang, interrupting the moment. He glanced at the screen and his face hardened. Isabella, he said, answering with a curt coldness. What is it? Charlotte couldn't hear the other side of the conversation, but she saw Alexander's expression shift from irritation to contained fury. No, it's not about work, he said, his voice growing harsher. Isabella, we've been over this. No, she's none of your business. This doesn't concern you. He hung up, his jaw tight. Trouble in corporate paradise? Charlotte asked, trying to sound casual. Isabella has trouble understanding boundaries, he said, running a hand over his face. She thinks that because we worked together for years and had a relationship, it gives her certain rights. Rights over your personal life? Charlotte finished. Ex-girlfriend? Unfortunately, he confirmed, and the word was heavy. Oh, she said, suddenly feeling like an intruder, completely uncomfortable. Maybe I should go. Please don't, Alexander said, an urgency in his voice that surprised her. At least not because of her. Don't give her that power. Charlotte hesitated. There was something in his expression, a mix of frustration and a silent plea, that made her want to stay. But her cautious nature, shaped by past disappointments, was on high alert. I don't know if this is a good idea, Alex. It probably isn't, he agreed with a sad smile. But when was the last time you did something that wasn't a good idea? Last night, apparently. And how did that turn out? He asked, his eyes fixed on hers. Charlotte looked around the luxurious kitchen, at the man she thought she knew, but who was revealing himself to be a complete enigma. I'm still figuring that out. Then figure it out with me, he said, his voice an irresistible invitation. Just for today. Against her better judgment, against every alarm bell in her head, Charlotte heard herself say, Okay, but if this is some kind of corporate game... It's not, he interrupted, the seriousness in his face unwavering. I promise. And for the first time since she'd known him, since she'd feared him in meetings, Charlotte believed him. The arts tour in Harborview was an explosion of color, sound, and creativity that contrasted sharply with the gray, silent corporate world Charlotte knew. They rented bikes near the harbor, and she couldn't help but notice how different Alexander looked. More relaxed, almost boyish, in a simple black t-shirt and jeans that made him seem more approachable. Less, CEO, do you bike often? She asked as they adjusted their helmets, feeling strangely shy. Every weekend, he replied, the wind messing up his hair. It's one of the few things that helps me disconnect from the company, to silence the spreadsheets in my head. I didn't know you had hobbies besides mergers and acquisitions. There are a lot of things you don't know about me. Charlotte Miller, he said, a challenging tone in his voice that made her smile. They started the tour by pedaling through the cobblestone streets of the old town, stopping at the first point, a gigantic mural that depicted the history of Harborview in vibrant colors, from its fishing village roots to its modern skyscrapers. It's incredible, Charlotte murmured, observing the intricate details, the play of light and shadow. You can feel the artist's passion in every brushstroke. You know about art? Alexander asked, watching her reaction with genuine interest. A little. I always wanted to study graphic design, but I ended up taking the more practical path, finance. Why not go back now? Take a night class, maybe. You know why, she said, looking at him directly. People like me can't afford to chase dreams. We have bills to pay, rent, my mom's health. People like you, people who weren't born with important last names and inherited fortunes don't get that. Alexander was quiet for a moment, his gaze lost in the mural. You think everything was easy for me, don't you? My parents died when I was 12, he said, his voice growing lower, almost inaudible against the sea breeze. My grandmother, the one who taught me about coffee, cleaned offices at night to support us. I started working at 14, delivering newspapers in the morning, helping at a grocery store in the afternoon. I got a scholarship to college, but had to work 3 part-time jobs to support myself and help at home. Charlotte stared at him, shocked. The story of the orphan who built an empire was a legend at the company, but no one ever told the details, the grit, the struggle. I didn't know. Of course you didn't. It's easier to hate me when you think I was handed everything, that I'm just some spoiled heir. I don't hate you, she said, realizing it was the absolute truth. I hate what you represent. And what do I represent? The system, she said, passion returning to her voice. The system that crushes people like my mom, who worked 60-hour weeks her whole life as a nurse and still barely made ends meet, while executives get multi-million-dollar bonuses. They continued biking, the silence between them now charged not with awkwardness, but with a new, fragile understanding. At the second stop, a contemporary art gallery, Charlotte paused before a series of black and white photographs depicting workers from different professions, their faces marked by exhaustion and dignity. These are powerful, she said, studying the expression of a man with calloused hands who looked like he carried the weight of the world on his shoulders. Yes, Alexander agreed, standing beside her, so close she could feel the warmth from his arm. They remind me why I started the company in the first place. To make money? She teased gently. To create jobs, he corrected, his gaze serious. To give people the opportunity and stability I didn't have when I was young. And what happened along the way? When did you stop caring about the people and start caring only about the numbers? The question hit him like a physical blow. He looked away. It happened when I realized that being kind in business was seen as a weakness. When I learned that to survive and grow in this world, I had to be colder, more calculating than everyone else. And did it work? She asked, her voice soft. It worked, he admitted bitterly, but it cost me a lot. What? My humanity, he said simply, and the pain in his voice was palpable. They continued the tour, visiting 2 more spots before arriving at the last. A small, artsy cafe with exposed brick walls where local musicians performed. They sat at a small table in the back, watching a young man play an acoustic guitar and sing about lost dreams and heartbreak. He reminds me of me at 20, Alexander said, watching the musician with a melancholy nostalgia. You played guitar? No, I painted, he said. And Charlotte nearly choked on her coffee. Graphic arts mostly. Pop art in the style of Warhol was my passion. Are you kidding me? I have a full studio in the penthouse, he confessed. I haven't been in it for years. Why did you stop? Because art doesn't pay the bills, he said, echoing her words from hours before and the circle closed. Charlotte was quiet, processing this shocking revelation. The CEO of Steel was an artist. Maybe we could paint together sometime, she said impulsively, then immediately blushed. I mean, if you want to get back into it, of course. I'd like that very much, he said, and the intensity in his eyes made her swallow hard, her heart pounding. Just then, the bell on the cafe door chimed, and Charlotte saw Isabella walk in, her predator's eyes scanning the room until they found them. The woman was exactly as Charlotte had imagined, tall, elegant in an expensive dress, sophisticated, and with an air of ownership that irritated her instantly. Alexander, Isabella said, her voice syrupy as she approached their table. What an incredible coincidence finding you here. Isabella, he replied, and the temperature around the table seemed to drop 10 degrees. His voice was back to the cold, sharp tone Charlotte knew so well. It's not a coincidence, is it? Of course it is, she lied brazenly, her eyes flicking over Charlotte with disdain. And you must be... Charlotte Miller, Charlotte introduced herself, standing and extending a hand in a gesture of defiance. Ha! The assistant, Isabella said, ignoring the offered hand and looking her up and down, judging the borrowed clothes. Analyst. Senior marketing analyst, Charlotte corrected, anger rising like liquid fire through her veins. Isabella. Alexander intervened, his voice dangerously calm. We were having a private conversation. About work, I imagine. Isabella said, sitting down uninvited, placing her designer handbag on the table. You know how dedicated Alex is. He never switches off. Actually, Charlotte said, finding a courage she didn't know she had. We were discussing art. Alex was just telling me about his forgotten passion for pop art. Isabella's expression flickered for a fraction of a second. Alexander hasn't painted in years. He's over that phase. Maybe it's time he revisited it, Charlotte retorted, looking directly at Alexander. Some passions are worth reviving. The double meaning was not lost on any of the three, and the tension at the table became almost palpable. Isabella, Alexander said finally, his patience gone, I need you to leave. Lex, she began, using an intimate nickname that made Charlotte's stomach turn. But he cut her off. Now, furious, Isabella stood, her eyes shooting daggers at Charlotte. This isn't over, she hissed. But it wasn't clear if she was talking to Alexander or to Charlotte. When she left, slamming the cafe door, Alexander turned to Charlotte, his face a mask of regret. I'm so sorry about that. Has she always been that? Intense? Worse, he admitted, looking exhausted. Much worse. Charlotte nodded, a strange sense of understanding dawning. Maybe it's time you set some clearer boundaries, Alex. Maybe it is, he agreed. And there was something in his eyes, an admiration that made Charlotte's heart race. But before she could even analyze what she was feeling, her phone rang. It was Beatrice, and her voice was a cry of panic. Charlie, you need to come home now, she said, her voice tight and choked with tears. It's your mom. She's in the hospital. Charlotte's world collapsed in a split second. The cafe, Alexander, Isabella, it all disappeared. Her mother, Eleanor, her rock, her inspiration, had collapsed at home while talking to Beatrice, who had been visiting. Beatrice had called an ambulance. Now she was in the emergency room at the county hospital, and the doctors didn't know what had caused her to pass out. I have to go, Charlotte said, standing abruptly, her hand shaking so badly she could barely hold the phone. Of course, Alexander said immediately, already on his feet. I'll take you. No, I can get a cab, Charlotte, he said, his voice firm but gentle, placing a hand on her arm to steady her. You're in shock. You shouldn't be driving or be alone right now. Let me help. During the entire drive to the hospital, a tense silence filled the car. Alexander remained calm and reassuring, navigating traffic efficiently while making discreet calls, using his name and influence to ensure Eleanor received the best and fastest care possible. Charlotte was immensely grateful for his presence, but at the same time, a part of her was confused. Why did he care so much? Why are you doing all this? She asked in a choked voice as they pulled up to the emergency entrance. He turned off the car and faced her. Because you need support, he said simply. And because, for some reason, I don't even fully understand myself, I care. The words hit her hard. For the past several years, she had gotten used to handling everything alone, to being the strong one everyone else relied on. Having someone here, taking care of her, was both terrifying and incredibly comforting. Beatrice met them at reception, her eyes red from worry and crying. Charlie, thank God you're here. She's stable, but the doctors want to run more tests. What happened exactly? Charlotte asked, trying to keep her voice steady, though her insides were falling apart. She was telling me how you hadn't called this morning, and she was joking that you must be with some new guy because you never stay out all night. And then she suddenly got pale and just collapsed. Charlotte felt a sharp pang of guilt. It's my fault. I should have called. It's not your fault, Charlotte, Alexander said firmly from her side, his presence an anchor in the storm. Your mother had a health issue that has absolutely nothing to do with a missed phone call. It was only then that Beatrice finally noticed Alexander standing next to Charlotte, and her eyes widened. Oh my God, you're Alexander Sterling. He extended his hand. I'm a friend of Charlotte's. Friend? Beatrice repeated, her jaw dropping as she looked from Charlotte to the billionaire and back again, her barely disguised curiosity overpowering her concern. Beatrice, Charlotte said in a warning tone. Right, sorry. Charlie. The doctor wants to speak with you. Dr. Chen was a kind, middle-aged man with tired eyes who explained that Eleanor had suffered an episode of severe high blood pressure, likely caused by a combination of stress and chronic exhaustion. Has she been working too much? He asked. She's retired, Charlotte said, but she does some extra sewing work to supplement her income. She refuses to stop. I see. We'll need to keep her for observation for a few hours, maybe overnight, but she should be fine. I recommend complete rest, less physical exertion, and much better stress management. Doctor, Alexander interjected, stepping forward, what would be the best course of treatment for her, the ideal scenario, regardless of cost? The doctor looked at him, then at Charlotte's visitor ID badge, clearly surprised. Well, the ideal would be a health plan that covers a private cardiologist, more in-depth tests, and top-tier medications, which often aren't available through the public system. Arrange it, Alexander said without hesitation. Transfer her to the best private hospital in the city. Hire the best cardiologist. I'll cover everything. Alex, no, Charlotte protested, feeling dizzy. We can't accept that. It's too much. You can, and you will, he said, his voice leaving no room for argument, but his gaze was soft. Your mother needs the best medical care available, and I can provide that. End of discussion. But why? Why would you do this for me? Alexander looked her in the eyes, and Charlotte saw something there, a vulnerability that made her forget how to breathe. Because you mean something to me, Charlotte. I don't know what it is exactly yet, but you do. Before she could even process those words, Isabella appeared in the hallway like a hellish mirage, looking as if she'd stepped out of a fashion magazine, even in the sterile environment of a hospital. Alexander, darling, she said, approaching with a fake venomous smile. I heard what happened and came to see if you needed anything. How did you know I was here? Alexander asked, his body tensing, clearly suspicious. I have my ways, she said vaguely. Then she looked at Charlotte with a look of feigned concern. I hope your mother will be all right. How do you know about my mother? Charlotte asked, a chill running down her spine. News travels fast, Isabella said evasively, but her eyes glinted with malice. Alexander studied Isabella's face with narrowed eyes. Are you following me? Of course not, darling. Don't be paranoid, she lied. I just worry about you. Isabella, Alexander said, his voice dropping dangerously low. I want you to leave, now. But Lex, now, he repeated, and there was something in his tone, an icy threat that even Isabella didn't dare to challenge. After she left, leaving a trail of expensive perfume behind, Charlotte turned to Alexander. She was following us, wasn't she? Probably, he admitted, looking grim. Isabella has issues with boundaries. And with the truth. What kind of issues? The kind that can be dangerous, he said, and there was a real deep concern in his voice. Charlotte, I think maybe you should stay away from me for a while. What? She asked, incredulous. Until I resolve this situation with Isabella once and for all. She's vindictive. If she sees you as a target, she could try to hurt you at work, or worse. Let me get this straight, Charlotte said, feeling anger and frustration build. You tell me I mean something to you, and in the next breath you're asking me to stay away? To hide? It's for your protection. No, she said firmly, surprising herself. I've spent my whole life avoiding trouble, keeping my head down. I'm not going to be one more person who runs away. If Isabella wants a war, she'll get one. Charlotte, you don't understand. She has resources, connections, and I have the truth, Charlotte interrupted. And supposedly, I have you on my side if you really meant what you said. Alexander looked at her with an admiration that took her breath away. You're incredible, you know that? I'm brave when I have to be, she corrected. But Alex, I need to know one thing and I need the truth. What? Is this real? What's happening between us? Because if this is just you rebelling against your controlling ex-girlfriend, using the junior analyst as a pawn, I need to know now. Alexander moved closer to her, ignoring the passing nurses, and placed his hands gently on her shoulders. Charlotte, I don't know what this is exactly, but I know it's the most real thing I've felt in years. Maybe ever. Even though I'm just, especially because you're you, he interrupted. Brave, principled, challenging, you make me want to be a better man. Before Charlotte could reply, Beatrice appeared in the hallway. Charlie, your mom's awake and asking for you. She's already in a private room. I'm going to go see her, Charlotte told Alexander, her heart a jumble of emotions. You don't have to stay. I'm staying, he said with unshakable certainty, for as long as you need. As Charlotte entered the room to see her mother, she didn't notice Isabella watching from a distance, hidden behind a pillar, making a phone call. Yes, I've managed to get some very interesting information. No, she won't be a problem for much longer. Prepare the documents. Eleanor Miller was sitting up in the private hospital bed, looking small and frail against the crisp white sheets. But her eyes shone with their old curiosity when she saw Alexander walk in right behind Charlotte. So, this is the young man who's stirring up my daughter's heart, she said directly, no beating around the bush, making Charlotte blush violently. Mom. Hello, Mrs. Miller, Alexander said, approaching with a genuine warm smile Charlotte had never seen. I'm Alexander Sterling. How are you feeling? Better, thank you. And thank you for all this, she said, gesturing to the spacious room. Charlotte told me what you did. It was nothing, he said. It was everything, Eleanor corrected, her gaze shrewd. My daughter has never let anyone take care of her. She's too proud. The fact that she accepted your help says a lot. Mom, please stop, Charlotte mumbled, mortified. I will not, Eleanor said stubbornly. Charlotte, you've spent years building walls around your heart. If this young man managed to find a crack in them in less than 2 days, maybe you should pay attention. Alexander looked at Charlotte with renewed interest. Walls? Stories for another day, Charlotte said quickly, trying to change the subject. She had her heart broken badly at 18, Eleanor continued, completely ignoring her daughter's protests. A boy from college, rich and charming, who used her to get information about a scholarship they both wanted. He dropped her as soon as he got what he needed. Since then, she's never trusted men with money or power. Mom, that's enough, Charlotte said, but her voice was gentle. I understand, Alexander said thoughtfully, his gaze fixed on Charlotte. That's why you hated me before you even knew me. I didn't hate you, Charlotte protested. I hated what you represented. And now, he asked softly. Charlotte looked at him, at her mother smiling in the hospital bed, at the whole crazy, impossible situation she found herself in. Now, I'm confused. Confusion is good, my dear, Eleanor said wisely. It means you're feeling something real. At that exact moment, Alexander's phone rang. It was Liam, his business partner and best friend. Man, where the hell are you? Liam asked, his voice tense. Isabella's here at the office. She's called an emergency board meeting and is telling them you're having a nervous breakdown, that you need to take a medical leave, and that she needs to assume some of your responsibilities temporarily. Alexander frowned, fury hardening his features. It's Saturday, Liam. Why are you at the office? She called me here saying it was a company emergency. Something about you being involved with a problematic employee who could sue the company for harassment and damage our image. Charlotte saw Alexander's expression shift to something dangerous. She said that. Yeah, and there's more. She brought documents, printed emails, reports that supposedly prove this employee is trying to blackmail you or something. She's painting a very ugly picture. What documents? I don't know, man. They look legit. But she's convincing the board that you're in no condition to be making important decisions right now. Alexander stood up abruptly, his body vibrating with anger. I'm on my way. Alex, Charlotte said, touching his arm, her heart frozen with dread. What's happening? Isabella is attempting a coup, he said, his voice low and lethal. She's using us, our situation, to question my competence as CEO and seize control. Our situation? The fact that we're together, he said. She must have pictures of us today at the arts tour. And those documents, she must have forged them. But we haven't done anything wrong. It doesn't matter, Alexander said bitterly. In the corporate world, appearances are more important than the truth. Then go, Charlotte said, even though the thought of him leaving hurt. Fix this. Come with me, he said suddenly, looking at her intensely. What? Come with me. We'll face this together. You're as much a part of this as I am. Alex, I can't leave my mom alone. I'll stay with her, offered Beatrice, who had just arrived with Charlotte's sister, Rebecca. Rebecca's on her way too. You two go and put an end to that witch. Eleanor held Charlotte's hand firmly. Sweetheart, your father always said sometimes you have to fight for what's worth it. Go. What if this costs me my job? She whispered to Alexander. Then we'll find you another one. A better one, Alexander said with fierce certainty. But we're not going to let Isabella destroy something that's barely begun. The drive to the office skyscraper was tense. Alexander was clearly furious, but underneath the anger, Charlotte could also see a steely determination she had never witnessed before. Alex, she said as he parked in the private garage, are you sure about this? If we walk in there together, hand in hand, there's no going back. The story will be everywhere. I'm sure of one thing, he said, turning to her, the car's engine humming softly. Charlotte, I know this is completely insane. We've only really known each other for less than 2 days, but I've never felt this way about anyone. You challenge me. You make me laugh. You make me want to be the man I was before I became cold and calculating. And what if it doesn't work out? She asked, her voice a thread. Then at least we tried, he said, taking her hand, his fingers lacing with hers. Are you with me? Charlotte took a deep breath, looked into his eyes, and saw her future there. I am. They walked into the imposing building together, taking the private elevator to the top floor where the boardroom was located. Muffled voices were audible through the frosted glass door. Clearly, he's not in a condition to be making rational decisions. Isabella's voice echoed, full of false concern. Look at these photos. He spent the entire day with a subordinate employee, ignoring his responsibilities, exposing the company to a lawsuit. Alexander opened the door without knocking, striding in with Charlotte firmly by his side. The room fell instantly silent. 5 board members, and Isabella turned to stare at them, shocked. Isabella, he said, his voice as sharp as ice. What an interesting meeting. Alexander, she said, quickly composing herself, a tense smile on her face. I'm so glad you're here. We were so worried. I'm sure you were, he said sarcastically. Gentlemen, he addressed the board members, all older men in suits. I'd like to introduce Charlotte Miller, our brilliant marketing analyst and the woman who made me realize our company has completely lost its way. Alexander, one of the board members, Mr. Davies said, visibly uncomfortable. Perhaps we should discuss this in private. No, Alexander said firmly. Ms. Ferreira decided to make this public, so we'll handle it publicly. He turned to Isabella. You want to question my competence? Let's talk about competence. When was the last time you visited one of our hotel properties and spoke with the housekeeping staff? When was the last time you spoke to an employee who wasn't senior management? That has no relevance, she spat. It has every relevance, Alexander interrupted, his voice echoing in the room. Because while you were in your comfortable office, plotting how to manipulate me and take my place, I was out there, discovering that our company has become the exact kind of predatory corporation that destroys local communities in the name of profit, and you were the architect of many of those policies. You're being dramatic and sentimental. I'm being honest, he retorted, a word you might not be familiar with. And as for you, Ms. Miller, another board member, Mr. Bishop said, eyeing her suspiciously, what is your interest in this situation? My interest is in working for a company that values its employees and the communities where it operates, Charlotte said, surprising herself with the firmness in her voice. And my interest is in supporting a CEO who has the courage to admit when he's wrong and the determination to try and correct the course. She's clearly influencing him, manipulating his decisions, Isabella said, desperate. She's helping me make better decisions, the right decisions, Alexander corrected. There's a difference. Gentlemen, he addressed the board again. You hired me to run this company because you trust my judgment. My judgment tells me that Isabella Ferreira no longer serves the interests of this organization. In fact, she has become a threat. Alexander, you can't do this, she began. I can and I am, he said, resolute. Isabella, you're fired. For cause. The silence in the room was deafening. You're not going to let him do this, Isabella pleaded, looking at the board. Actually, the chairman of the board, Mr. Tanaka, said after exchanging glances with the other members, I think Alexander's right. Your behavior today has been inappropriate, and your attempted coup, based on documents our IT department has just confirmed are forgeries, is unacceptable. Isabella looked around the room, her face pale with fury, realizing she had lost. This isn't over, she hissed, grabbing her bag. Yes, it is, Alexander said calmly. And Isabella, if you ever try to harm Charlotte or this company in any way, I will use every resource at my disposal to make sure you bitterly regret it. After Isabella stormed out, slamming the door, the chairman stood. Alexander, we hope you know what you're doing. For the first time in a long time, I know exactly what I'm doing, Alexander said, looking at Charlotte with an emotion that made her heart soar. I'm choosing what's right. When they were alone in the vast boardroom, Charlotte turned to Alexander, the adrenaline beginning to fade. You just fired your chief advisor because of me. I fired a toxic, manipulative employee who was harming the company and the people in it, he corrected, moving closer to her. And I chose the woman who reminded me who I really am. And who are you really? She whispered. Someone who believes that success shouldn't cost us our humanity, he said, his voice full of conviction. Someone who wants to build something better. With you. He gently touched her face, his thumb stroking her cheek. Charlotte, I know it's too soon for big words, but I need you to know. In 2 days, you've changed my life. You've changed mine, too, she admitted, her voice thick with emotion. When he kissed her, it was soft at first, then deeper, full of promises and the relief of a battle won. Charlotte felt all the walls she had built around her heart for so many years finally come tumbling down. So, she said when they broke apart, breathless, what do we do now? Now? Alexander said, smiling, the first truly lighthearted smile she had ever seen from him. We go back to the hospital to see your mom. And then, if you'd like, we can go to my penthouse and I can finally show you my art studio. You really want to paint again? With you, he said, his eyes shining. I want to do everything with you. Charlotte laughed, feeling lighter than she had in years, maybe her entire life. Then let's paint our own story. Epilogue. 6 months later. The art gallery was packed, the sound of lively conversation and clinking champagne glasses filling the air. On the walls hung a joint collection by Alexander and Charlotte that blended his traditional pop art techniques with her modern, sensitive graphic design. The exhibition was called Second Act, and it told stories of new beginnings, second chances, and the beauty found in the most unexpected places. I still can't believe we did this, Charlotte said, watching people admire one of her favorite pieces. An abstract portrait that represented the transformation of a cold corporation into a more human, vibrant organization. I always knew we would, Alexander said, wrapping his arms around her from behind, his chin resting on her shoulder. We make a good team, in art, in business, and in life, she agreed, tilting her head back to kiss him. The change at the company had been gradual but significant. With Charlotte now as the director of social responsibility, they implemented programs that benefited both employees and local communities. The changes had resulted in higher employee satisfaction and, surprisingly to the board, higher profits. Alexander, dear, Eleanor approached, elegant in a blue dress, her health fully restored thanks to proper medical care. Congratulations on the exhibition. You two are incredibly talented. Thank you, Eleanor, Alexander said, kissing the forehead of the woman who had become like a second grandmother to him. And you, Charlotte, she continued, her eyes twinkling, you never told me how you decided to trust him after building those walls for so long? Charlotte looked at Alexander, who was chatting animatedly with Beatrice and Liam about the next exhibition. I realize some walls are meant to protect us, but others just keep us from living. He didn't try to tear down my walls, Mom. He showed me it was safe to open the gate. Liam approached, clearly merry from the opening champagne. Man, he said to Alexander, you have to see the comments on the gallery's Instagram. Everyone's calling you two the most authentic power couple in the city. Power couple? Charlotte laughed. It's what they call it when two talented people get together and create something greater than the sum of their parts. Beatrice explained. And you two definitely qualify. Speaking of which, Alexander said, suddenly looking nervous, which was rare. Charlotte, can I talk to you in private for a second? He led her to a more secluded corner of the gallery where one of their largest joint works, a vibrant mural depicting harbor view through the eyes of two people in love, took up the entire wall. Charlotte, Alexander began, his voice a little shaky. These last 6 months have been the best of my life. Mine too, she said, feeling her heart speed up at the intensity in his eyes. You've taught me that it's possible to be successful without losing your soul. You've taught me that real love isn't about possession or control, but about inspiring each other to grow. Charlotte, let me finish before I lose my nerve, he said, smiling nervously. I know we've only been together for 6 months, that this all started in a crazy way, but when you know. He got down on one knee right there in front of their mural, pulling a small velvet box from his jacket pocket. Charlotte Miller, will you marry me? The ring was perfect, simple, elegant, with a diamond that caught the light like a promise of a bright future. Charlotte looked at him, at the man who had started as her hated CEO and had become her best friend, her art partner, and the love of her life. Yes, she said, tears of happiness blurring her vision. Yes, I will. The entire gallery, which had been secretly watching, erupted in applause as Alexander kissed her. And Charlotte realized that sometimes the best love stories start in the most unexpected ways. I love you, Alexander murmured against her lips. I love you too, she answered. My favorite CEO. Your only CEO, he corrected, laughing. Forever, she promised. And as they kissed again, surrounded by their art and the people they loved, Charlotte knew she had finally found her place in the world. Not as the junior analyst trying to prove her worth, but as a whole woman, an artist, a partner, who had chosen to share her life with someone who saw her for exactly who she was. At that moment, Charlotte's phone vibrated in her pocket. Later, curious, she would check it. She would see an email from an unknown sender. No subject, no text, just an attachment. A complex bank statement showing a series of transfers from one of the company's subsidiaries to an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. Transactions that had been authorized and then skillfully hidden by none other than Isabella, a time bomb left behind. But for now, in that perfect moment, surrounded by art and love, she knew none of that. She had everything she needed, each other, and the certainty that sometimes it's worth waking up in a stranger's bed, especially when that stranger turns out to be the exact person you've been waiting for your whole life.